in India and has worked with the Government of India's Ministry of Finance from 2004 in taking forward gender budgeting. She is also the author of two very famous books in public finance, The Fiscal Consolidation, Budget Deficits and Macroeconomy, and has co-authored a book on social sector in a decentralized economy, India in the era of globalization. Some of her recent work has been in the area of fiscal seniorage. She works largely in the macro fiscal policy and human development area, and her work spans across Asia Pacific, and some specific countries include Sweden, Canada, Morocco, Philippines, South Africa, Sri Lanka, and Mexico. Today she is going to talk to us on fiscal policy and gender equality. And a characteristic Rekha style, there is no PPT, so we all have to make notes. So welcome, Lekha.
Thank you, Swati. Thank you so much. I have not prepared my PPT, but two references I would like to share with you. One is the working paper, that's an IMF, like working paper number 150, 2016. And another book of mine published by Palgrave. It's titled Fiscal Policy for Sustainable Human Development in Asia Pacific. So that's a 2022 publication. So these are my, the things. So they don't have to write down the notes. I will send you the links and they can use that. And having said that, thank you so much once again, Swati, for inviting me to deliver this lecture at Mumbai University. Of course, it's my privilege. And as you mentioned, the gender budgeting, it started in India in the early 2000s as a fiscal innovation. And why do I call it as a fiscal innovation? Because like any other innovation, it passed through several stages, like the way, in the beginning, it was model building. Like each country experiences the gender issues differently. So there is no global model for gender budgeting. So initially, the first phase of the fiscal innovation was to build a country-specific knowledge networking and a country-specific model. And there, the huge constraint that happened was with related to the macroeconomic framework itself, because that time we were moving towards a rules-based fiscal economics. Within the rules-based fiscal economics, when we think that the deficit is not good, the deficit is bad, so we need to have a fiscal consolidation. So in this framework, what's fiscal space, or what is the area for the public financial management reforms like gender budgeting? So that was the question addressed. So within this 3% that mandatory fiscal deficit, if we are reaching the fiscal consolidation through the expenditure compression and the tax buoyancy path, then the human development related questions or human development related allocations and the gender budgeting will face a cut or will face a kind of a stagnation. And that's exactly what has happened. If you look into the gender budget statement, you can understand that over the years, scholars have asked the question, of course this is a promising fiscal innovation, it's a promising fiscal framework, but why the allocation remains stagnant over time? Why there was no ex-ante approach to gender budgeting by identifying the gender needs and get into the costing methodology and you have a new program? So these were the two questions asked. And in the beginning, when we did that knowledge building phase, that NIPFP was involved in doing the knowledge building and the country specific model, in that phase it was primarily taken like it is an exposed exercise in the sense we ask the question how much country is spending on gender development, and that is important for fiscal transparency and accountability. So gender budgeting was initially floated as a tool for fiscal accountability. It was an accountability tool, and this accountability tool we got into numerous methodologies, and one such methodology was public expenditure benefit incentive incidence analysis. And the public expenditure benefit incidence analysis, we need to have two important components. One is a unit cost and the other is unit utilized. So we need to understand what is a unit cost of a specific program and what is a unit utilized, that you get into the surveys, the large scale surveys, and identify in the health, in the education sector, we identified the unit utilized by men and women across the income quintiles. So we could understand that there is a kind of elite capture. There could be corruption or deals, that's an entirely different question, but there was an elite capture. It was not exactly the Q1 that was accessing the public spending. So these questions from the perspective of class and the intersectionality issues, like it's not only from the income quintiles perspective but across socioeconomic groups, this question was asked to understand the distributional impact of a public spending related to gender development. So that public expenditure benefit incidence analysis, that methodology was very crucial to capture the gender budgeting. So in the unit, in the beginning phase, the unit of analysis was intra-household. So that was a myth, that household is a unit of analysis of a public policy. No, intra-household needs to be the unit of analysis of a public policy. So that was, what gender budgeting has done. The unit of analysis has been taken from household to intra-household. And we started asking questions about what is happening within the household. Then this bargaining skills, the non-economic issues, all that matter. But given these variables, these non-economic variables, what is the role of fiscal policy in attaining gender equality was the question asked. Of course, control for the economic growth. The question asked was, we need to move the paradigm of the macroeconomic policy making from the economic growth to growth plus paradigm or beyond GDP paradigm. That time, it was even prior to the Millennium Development Goals that we asked a question on gender budgeting. That time we didn't have a global goal. There was no sustainable development goal that time. So that time was very crucial, to understand that how difficult it was for the policy makers or for the economists to make the policy makers understand the significance of gender budgeting, because everything was in terms of economic growth that time. Now, in the knowledge building phase, in the fiscal innovations first phase, primarily the question asked was related to the measurement issues. How do you measure human development? Because GDP is not synonymous to human development. So how do you measure it? Then we have the Mehbubul Haq, Sudhir Anand and Amartya Sen methodology, in which there is a gender sensitive equality indicator, or we call it as equally distributed equivalent methodology. So it's like a harmonic mean. You give weightage. It's a construction of a harmonic mean, giving importance to the both components, male and female, and you construct the indicators related to the three prime priorities of the human development. That time it was taken, what was taken was education, health and income. So it was from the gender neutral human development index, we have gone into a gender sensitive equality indicator that is called GESI, or equally distributed equivalent, by giving penalty to the gender inequality, and an index was constructed. So that's a way, one variable, one quantification was done to measure the gender development. Now ask the question, what is the relationship, or is there any link between the public policy or the public expenditure related to the gender development and the gender outcomes? The outcome, the measurement, what we have constructed is that GESI, gender equality sensitive indicator. Now, when you ask that question in econometric methodology, you have to control for economic growth. So the question was to look into the coefficients related to the economic growth, the coefficients related to the gender budgeting, especially the public expenditure in social sector, then controlling for all the other factors which which affect the development, the human development. So that's the way we looked into that question. And from prima facie that, the analysis, gave us a hint that it is not economic growth that is getting translated into a gender-aware human development. It is the public policy-related variables. Then we have to ask the question, if public expenditure has got a better role to play in translating into better gender-aware human development, what kind of public spending? That narrative. Recently, the narrative was whether you need a participation income or a basic income. You need to provide cash transfers into the hands of the people, or you give an employer of last resort policy so that the people participate in the economy and earn an income. So this debate continues: participation income versus universal basic income. But that time, if you remember that there was a study, that study was related to the question, which expenditure matter for the proper development. So what is having more impact on the poverty alleviation? So they have they have done a econometric model, and the model results, gave the empirical evidence that the variables or the expenditure related to the R&D, the expenditure related to the mainstream spending, these coefficients are relatively greater than the coefficients related to the explicit, specifically targeted programs related to the poor. So we have a lot of flagship programs. Gender budgeting is, of course, not a flagship program. It is a public financial management tool. It's a tool, PFM tool. So they ask a question, why then we need to, design so many specifically targeted programs for the poor, for the women. If you have strong mainstream expenditure, then that's going to have better impact on human development or better impact on poverty alleviation. So that was a result. Then, from the gender perspective, the questions asked, related to the two needs of poor. One is strategic needs. The other is, practical needs. The practical needs, of course, we can say that public policy need not get into this specifically targeted business. You can focus your spending on infrastructure and R&D. Then, you are assuming that the budget doesn't discriminate. Fiscal policy doesn't discriminate. Of course, we don't discriminate when we, do the design, but men and women are at the asymmetric levels of socio-economic development. So when men and women are at the asymmetric levels of the socio-economic development, though we design a budgetary policy or the fiscal policy as gender neutral, it can turn gender blind unless we correct for it. So that was the argument from the equality and efficiency perspective, equity perspective. So it's not that you have equal opportunity, like men, women, girls and boys across income quintiles can come and access it. Then we looked into the benefit incidence analysis results, and we came to know that it's not like that. Leave nobody behind. That LNOB paradigm or the framework is very crucial in getting the public policy quite correct. Otherwise, you enter into equality in processes, but that need not translate into equality in outcomes. So you need to have an equity lens over there, so that we do not leave anybody behind, and we do not keep people vulnerable. And that's exactly the public policy. The role of the public policy is to remove this unfreedoms in terms of sense methodology or the sense vocabulary or the sense terminology. It is like removing unfreedom. So gender budgeting, the analytical framework, was floated from that perspective, that the public policy has got a role to play, so that we need not keep anybody vulnerable when we progress. So the analytical framework, of course, the methodology used was the public expenditure benefit incidence analysis, and analytical framework, sense capability framework can form a beautiful analytical framework to get into the questions related to the gender budgeting. In the sense, the capability framework has got three layers. One is, of course, the capability, next is functionings, and the third is commodity space. And there is a beautiful paper in London School of Economics written by Lord Meghnad Desai. He used the capability approach framework to ask the questions related to the poverty. So into this capability metrics, he has marked the rights-based capabilities, rights-based in the sense of right to live, right to have education, right to health, right to have mobility. So he has done the series or the listing of the capabilities. Now, in the functionings metrics, what he has done is look into the data in the sense whether the capabilities are translated into functionings by looking into the men, women, the gender disaggregated socioeconomic groups across